God must exist, otherwise life would be meaningless. Welcome to Friday Fallacy. This week we're looking at the appeal to consequences fallacy. The appeal to consequences fallacy is when the truth of a proposition is asserted based on its consequences rather than the evidence for it. That is, instead of providing evidence for the truth of a claim, its consequences are presented instead. This is not a sound way of arguing, as the consequences of a proposition are unrelated to whether it's true. The fact that some people are comforted by the idea of God doesn't make it any more likely that God exists. Similarly, that some people find a lack of ultimate meaning in life to be distressing isn't an argument against it. Some examples of the appeal to consequences fallacy are: without God, there's no right or wrong, just opinions. The Christian God can't exist, he's a psychopathic mass murderer. Evolution says we're all just monkeys, that we're just animals. If we find the defendant not guilty, it'll encourage other people to commit crime. Discussing the consequences of a proposition is not always an appeal to consequences fallacy. When we debate different courses of action to take, it is important to consider the likely outcomes of these actions. In this case, we are arguing that we should take a particular action to achieve desired outcomes. This is what often happens in political debate. For example, when considering whether to allow gay marriage, it is legitimate to consider what the consequences of any such law may be. Note that in this case we are debating what to do, not what is true. Also, it's not a fallacy to consider the logical implications of a proposition. That is, if I assert that God answers prayers, it's legitimate to ask why he doesn't heal amputees. This is a logical consequence of the premise, not a causal consequence. The clearest distinction is that an appeal to consequences fallacy is when you're asked to decide whether a belief or statement is true based on whether it leads to a desirable outcome. Deciding truth based on desirable outcomes is just a kind of wishful thinking. In conclusion, the appeal to consequences fallacy is when the truth of a proposition is asserted based on its consequences rather than on the evidence for it. Until next time, keep your fallacies to yourself.